Hi, my name's Mike Wells. I'm from Force Mass Motion. Welcome to my studio in my small room here in sunny Sussex. And today I'm going to show you a few of the tips and tricks that I use on 3 of my new singles for my forthcoming album project. Okay, so this is the first track that I have written on starting the Force Mass Motion project again. I've been dormant, working in a day job for about the last 7 years or so, and I just had a gig offer which started me into getting me into producing again. Started listening to a lot of more stuff that I just kind of appreciate from a production point of view. And then started Instagramming, all that kind of stuff, and then people were saying to me, come on, I need to get a breaks track out of you, you know what's going on. So this is it. And I actually started primarily with the machine, which is over here, and found that I quickly reached a big limitation with it in terms of production and techniques and all that kind of stuff. So the first bit of software that I bought to carry myself to the next step is Cubase. Started at 9.5 and then we're now in version 10, which is a big breath of fresh air for me. So what I've done is I've moved all the samples and everything, bounced them all and pulled them all into Cubase, which you can see here. There's some loops going on here, and then I've moved the MIDI parts into here, running the plugins which are running some of the sounds. So I start a very basic template which has absolutely nothing in it, because I've made most of the quick speed through machine to get the place where I need to be to do the, what I would say, more professional touch on it in Cubase. So I've got, what I used to do here way back in the day is I've got all of the stuff which I pulled in from machine and I run it here muted in the first 8 bars. So that if ever I need to go back to anything and copy stuff back into the project later, I can just grab one of the initial things, pull it back into the arrangement later, and then chop it up and reuse it. So I've always got an empty starting point, which I can refer back to. And then I go ahead and start arranging. Let's have a quick look down the tracks here, and I'll show you what's running and where it came from, and then you'll have an idea of where I start getting a track together. Now, like I said before, we were in machine, so a lot of this had been compiled in one 8-bar loop, which are these greyed out segments here. Now we can solo the crash. Now obviously a crash is a crash. Now I've dragged the audio, dumped it into crash, and it's just a crash cymbal which runs, and we obviously just get a dirty crash here. Got it going through a ping pong delay, because what I want my crash to do, I've rolled the bottom end of it off, I've edited the end of it so we get a nice tail on it, and I want the crash, every time I hear it, I want the crash to go like this. So it's a mono crash to start off with, but of course I want to get the emphasis of the crash on the mix. Now you won't hear the ping pong because the ping pong is in time with the track, because it'll go tsh, 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 but I want to get the spread on the crash. I can do that with reverb as well, but the reverb tends to busy the crash a little bit too much because it's quite, you know, it's a high-end element. On this version, I've got my ping pong and all of my effects set up on effects channels, just like I would on my old desk, because that's the way I was comfortable in working. So I've got sends going to things that are already set up. So I've got a ping pong delay here set up. So dragging this onto here so you guys can see it. Set up at a quarter sync. We've got 15% feedback. It's 100% wet because we don't want any of the send to come out of that channel, because that channel is going to go to main. So it's going to be wet completely. The crash is going to come out the main channel, which I want to hear it, and then the ping pong delay is then going to come out of the effects out to the master. So that's how that effect sends work. Right, so that's the crash taken care of. Right, moving down, we've got I think probably the best thing to do is we'll do it per track, so I'm not missing anything. Right, we've got a rise here, and a rise is to come out of a drop down, and we want to build some energy. It's just, I haven't got this set too loud in the mix actually. It's going through a plate reverb, so when we come off the end of it, it goes off the end. Now we're mixing it in, right, the crash is running there as well, because the crash has got an effects send running into the ping pong. But the rise is just sits there into a long plate reverb off the end of it, because we don't want to destroy any of the energy that we've just built up over the breakdown. So that's just a simple rise. That's come out of my own library of samples that I had from way back. I've compiled them all, and now when I got back in the studio again, I put them all onto an audio drive, which is in my kit here. So I can go back through all my old sample library and use those things. I've tried not to bog myself down in going through all the old samples, because I think you can get yourself a bit lost in where you were, and I did get into a bit of a rut with it all. So yes, so that's a sweep coming out of the breakdown. We'll play the breakdown in a little bit, but let's just go through each thing separately here. Whenever I'm doing groove sections, I don't want the groove section to just keep going on through 16 bars, because in some tracks, great, you've got a nice groove section, it's rolling and you want to keep them rolling, and when you're in a club it's got a different atmosphere, and atmosphere in a club will work differently because you've got a groove set up. But I still want to give an extra pace of energy, especially when I'm going to come up to a breakdown. So it can only be just something simple, like just add a shaker in, or something like that. But this has just got a ride cymbal. So we've just got a 909 ride cymbal here. And the 909 ride cymbal is just basically going to run us on the 8 bars up to the breakdown, just to give us an extra little touch of energy running into the breakdown. So that's our ride, nice and simple. Okay, so we're at kick now. I briefly touched upon it before, but this time, because this is again my first track back into things, I've rendered the kick out of Machine and I've dumped it into here. Not necessarily the best thing to do, because now it's an audio file and I don't have as much control over it. And if I want to bump a kick, I've got to chop it out and then I've got to move it within the audio. So one of the lessons that I've quickly learned, and maybe if you're starting out doing these sorts of things, keep as much in MIDI if it's a MIDI triggered sound. Because then, if like I say, if you just want to bump the kick and do a different arrangement on the kick, you've got to rearrange the audio file. You don't want to be doing that, because if it's MIDI, you can just bump the note around. You may want to pitch it down, not on a kick, of course. But so anyway, so this has got a rendered kick loop in it, and that's feeding the sidechain into the pad. I'll touch on the pads later and I'll show you how I'll set the sidechain up. So that's just a basic kick, which will then work with the loops. So what I'll do is we'll leave the kick on and then we'll run it with the 2 loops that I've got, just so that at least it has some relevance, because otherwise it's just... This will be the starting point of where I start to get a track going. Get some loops that work nicely with each other. Here I've picked 2. One was quite empty. Wanted to just fill some gaps in it. I talk a lot about with people and producers that I go and have a drink with. Not putting too much in a track, making sure that there's enough there to keep the energy there. But I used to be a big victim of putting too much in there. Too many shaker loops, too many hi-hat loops. And you get this nice wall of sound which you understand, but you put it in a club and it's like pow, it's just too much. So so in here, yeah, there is a snare in here as well running, but I'll turn we've got a kick. Let's just quickly so the snare, basic snare, again rendered out of Machine, and I've also, has it got a fill on it? It's only a quick fill, but again, because it's an audio loop, I've had to chop it to get it to do the arrangement, which is done. So I'm saying my own track's dumb, by the way, so that's a bit crazy. But yes, so it's just proving that that's not really the way to go, and I've learned that, and that's okay. So we've got one of the things here in Cubase. Chopped the bit that I need, flipped it around and reversed it, because I want to introduce the kit. I want to introduce the drum loop, and by just chopping it and going, you know, and doing an arrangement or something, it's just not really going to work. And I always like the idea of doing reverse flicks into things. So, and it comes in. That's the first loop. Got a brush loop here on the top. We'll run that back from here. Nice and toppy. Nothing too bottomy on there. There's one thing on there. I was just going to check to see whether I've got an EQ, and I haven't actually. I'll bounce it straight out with it. And those two sit quite nicely with each other. The other kit's got quite a bottom end kick on. The other brush loop sits just on the top. And actually with these, I've got them, the brush loops and the jump kit, I've got them panned just so that they'll not sit on top of each other too much. They're only 20 each side, but just enough just to give them a little bit of their own room. So let's move on to this first synth that we've got to. This is a UE Repro. Well, I'll run it back from the beginning because it runs offbeat, like Panic Intro, but so you can hear it just going in between it. If I ran it, it would sound like it was on the offbeat. It would sound like it was on the on beat. It's also got some automation running on it as well. So when we get up here, you can just see the automation here creeping in. Let's just quickly flick it on. Both loops now run with the repro running. And what I want to do is I want to have a nice flat intro, so when you mix it on a deck or whatever, you've got something to mix on, and then this is now the mix point coming in. So the DJ can use this now to start moving from one track to the other. He doesn't have a kick or anything to worry about too much either. So now he's going to get ready to wind the other track out. Drums go, crash comes in, nice breakdown, next track, my track, hopefully, if they liked it. Okay, so that is a UE Repro. So now, let's just quickly click this. And that's what gives me control. So I just automate the filter. You can go to the automation settings on it, and I've got a cutoff here set up, so I can draw my cutoffs in. Machine does it really badly. It does it in steps, and it's horrible. But here, as well you know, or maybe as you don't, you can just draw a straight line. Just go all the way from top to bottom, and it'll just run it straight in. That's perfect. So that's what gives me my build on my repro, up to the intro, and then we'll zoom out. And then, as you can see here, all across the whole track, all my repro mods all sorted here with the cutoff. So that's that. Now I've got a send on the repro as well by the looks of it. Now the send, yes I have. It's because I want to get rid of the repro when it comes to the breakdown. This will become more relevant when you hear the track in its entirety, but that should all be set up to run. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to solo this. There we go. Right, I want to bin the repro off because I don't want it running through the breakdown. So I'm winding up the send into the plate reverb, and I'm ducking the modulation down on the filter. There you go, I've binned it off. So it's a neat way of getting rid of it. I could actually probably go even I was going to say even worse, but even more on the plate reverb to give it a buff on the end, or even a ping pong delay would be quite a neat way of getting rid of it. But I didn't want to just chop it on the end of the break because it just sounded wrong. You get this sound all the way, and especially as I've got a rise coming in on the last 8 before the breakdown. It's going to run all the way up, and then you've now run it all the way up with all this energy here, with all the rides, nearly everything in the track running. And it's like, I can't just go chop. So yeah, so that's a neat way of running something off into the breakdown. Plus the fact, the next thing that we're going to arrive at is the main riff of the song. So what I'll do is, probably one of the good things to do is we'll run it with the riff. And I'm being sneaky with that as well. High pass filter. One goes down, the other one comes up. The repro leaves. By the time it's left, we're now full guns in with the. It's not sounding very wide or anything at the moment because it's not sat in the main mix. I think actually it's got the filter and everything on it. It's got the sends. You know what? I think I just ran it in headphones and just thought it doesn't need to be busier than that, because if it was, it's just going to start getting too clattered. All these delays pinging on top of each other. I need for you to be able to hear at least some kind of melody in it. And another thing that I did with this, let's get the editor up. Let's have a quick look at the synth. So Zebra, Yui again, just completely brilliant. Let's just do this. If I select it would help. Just an arpeggio that's running running a Zebra. It's a track in itself, isn't it? Completely brilliant. So that's got its own delay on it. I don't think I didn't really need to put, like I say, I don't want to clatter it anymore. And I managed to get a chord change out of it as well. I don't usually head for chord changes. I kind of find them cringeable in a way. But this time it just took it really nicely. High pass filter. That is Steinberg. There you go. It's just moving the position of a high pass filter down, so I can roll it in, and then we get the chord change. Sounds great. Plus the fact, later on in the track, we get to use it on the outro. We get to use it with no chord change. So come off the chord change, and then it's literally. So you're expecting the chord change on the outro, but it's an outro. Just keep it going. So the track's now getting less complicated towards the end, which is exactly what you want it to do. So there we are with Yui. So now we're getting down to the bottom. So when I'm writing a track, I'll do drums to get a groove. I'll put a bass line on it that's probably wrong, but at least it'll work. Riffs on top of that, and as long as I've got the right bass sound to work in the combination of that, then I'll then go back after I've got the main riff in to get the bass line working. Just so that it'll, because I don't 100% know what the main riff's going to be until I'm 100% happy with it. Then when I am, then I know where there's space for the bass to go. Now my first hit at the moment is I go to the Juno 106 on the plugin cloud. So I've subscribed to that. 106 will be one of the things that I pick if I don't get the boutique 106, because the boutique 106 is great. I've been toying with getting it, but I've just got an SEO2, and that's really, really good as well. It may not be quite as good punchy on the bottom end, but if you compress it, we could talk about that. There's another track I think we're going to talk about, but we can listen to that running live, and I'll show you the compressor and everything that I've used on that. But anyway, that's me arguing against Roland, against her own products. So, but it's really good. We've got a nice. Let's go to where I started with it. I think I started with it basic bassline. All I usually do with this, I like things just going do 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 off the filter a little bit more. I always like things that do that. It makes them sound a little bit tighter. This was quite lazy to start off with, I think. So I just tightened the filter up on it, gave it a little bit more envelope mod, and pulled the envelope down a little bit more. Then gave it a bit more frequency, so it starts, you know, it's not doing that, but, well, it is, but it's doing that down on the bottom end. Just hear it just going, and the resonance, not very high, but it's just enough so that it does it, and then on these monitors it sounds superb. So yeah, so then, so now I've arrived at, got the main riff in, main riff's over the drums, perfect, wrong bass line, now swap the bass line out. This track started off with not a chord change, but then I wanted it to have a chord change. So I'm suspecting that the chord change comes in after the main drop, but let's see. Not going to have a chord change. So it's gonna ride all the way over the main groove until we get to the main riff. It's gonna keep going, blah 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 blah. Not gonna do anything special. Here we go. Actually, interestingly, in this version of all this stage of me using Cubase, I haven't got into colouring tracks and colouring blocks, which is one thing that I'm going to start using a lot more. It's so much easier to spot it. Chord this one here, chord change. So we're now back up off the main break, and then here's the chord change coming. It's only a chord change, but there we are. Right, interestingly there, you'd think it'd go do 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 do, it'd go down, but it gets too low, and you've got to be conscious of that in the mix. So I've made it go up instead. So we're still kind of, because if I was going to copy this going down, it'd be too low. So I've just moved it up instead. To get the right movement on the chord change, but it's now not going down or not down a fifth or whatever it's doing, it's going up. So another sneaky little trick. Just make sure you watch the bottom end and everything. Isn't it great to have a load of bass? But isn't it the worst problem if you've got too much? So, you know, another thing to be really conscious of. Right, down on the pads now. The pads are in, oh look, there's a surprise. It's another Yui product, Deep Fjord. Let's put the MIDI down here. I mean, it's just got monumental Tron pad written all over it, hasn't it? Perfect. I don't know whether some of them have got really good modulation, so it's worth giving a mod wheel a quick flick. I've got my C1 here, which is on my old JV80. I can't get rid of this, it's completely cool. And I'm really used to playing it as well. Yes, it's got a plastic keyboard, yes, it's not fully weighted, but I'm used to using it. So, but check the mod wheel on these things, because some of the presets say check the mod wheel. So that's one of their presets, Deep Fjord. I used to have I used to have a Emu vintage keys that had a really, really lush, lovely pad on it, and I was just hunting around for the same thing as soon as I got this set up, and then finally I've found one, and I'll probably use it on everything. But you don't have to have it loud. It's just got to sit here. It just sits in the background here. Doesn't move around too much. In fact, actually, I've just got it ramping up a little bit on volume as it comes in, just to give a nice little, you know, pop the loop over it. As we said before, the loop sits here, but the pads sit here, so they don't have to be too loud. I'm stretching my arms out really wide, so you probably can't see. But there we go. So there's the pads and the riff working together on the loop. Right, then the rest is we've got a preverb here. Right, okay, this is cool. Now preverbs I used to use quite a bit, and on this track I built them. So a preverb is this. Is it going to work? Right. I'll give away one of my little secrets. There's probably a million ways to do this. So what I've done is I've got the loop, off of the Reap Pro by the looks of it. I've run it out, so I've got one note of it. I take it out now and I go to SoundForge, which I've got. Always use SoundForge. It's just brilliant for chopping up things. I always prep my masters in SoundForge as well. So I can top and tail them, I can ramp them, I can run through an L1 maximizer, ready to go for mastering. So I've got one note and I put that through a big reverb, and then I spin the whole thing round, back reverse it, chop the note off, and now I've got the tail of the reverb but backwards, and it goes. And the good thing about it is you put it on the beginning of the note, and it just goes just like that, and you don't even have to. I think I'll probably put it through a ping pong delay. I had. Yeah, on this one I've got it running through a plate reverb send and a long ping pong delay as well. Sometimes you don't have to. Give it a try. So what you do is you take the first note and you run it through a reverb, chop the note off, flip it round, do a fade in, and then you've now got the like that. Then bung it before the first note of the riff. Just see what it sounds like. A neat way to either bring a riff in, or come off the end of a groove section or something like that. I shouldn't be telling you all these things, I mean, honestly. And that's it. Pretty simple. I know that's a lot to take in, and this time round on this track, not really the best way to work in, because I'm using run-out loops of kicks, and the ride here, great. Okay, I'll put the ride in probably a little bit later on, because the ride's a MIDI, a MIDI section, perfect. So I now got full control over the ride when I need it, when I don't need it. I can take bits out when I need it. I can put them in different parts. With the kick, what a bit of a Burke I am, but not too big a so, because at the time of relearning Cubase, there it is. And in fact, it looks like I needed a 4-bar loop as well, which was even more silly. Not so bad, but so then I've in Cubase joined them up, glued them together, copied them across. Still works though, so that's okay. You kind of dug yourself in a hole in the way with the loops anyway. The loops are done in the same way, but with a loop, you can chop it up and reverse it. That's I won't blab on about these loops too much, but this has got reverse on the front of it. So again, just got a snare, run that in, reversed it in Cubase, just so it's got a little bit something more interesting, just to bring the loop. A DJ friend of mine said, play that again, I can't get used to listening to it. So for me it works, just a neat way of introducing a loop instead of just going boof. You might try the reverb thing on it, see whether or not you can get a loop coming in nicely like that. Chop the first drum off, take that. I'm sure you can edit it in Cubase. I think I'll learn, but the me taking it out and putting it in something and doing it now, I think you can just run it in a channel in here and then render the channel. Then once the channel's rendered, flip the channel, chop the drum off, and then that should work. So yeah, there's a name for this track. It's on my phone. Faster than the speed. It's not faster than the speed of sight, but it could be something like that. But this is going to be the first Force Mass single back on the first EP. So this is now ready to go to mastering. So everything's done, all the automation's done on it, and I can now bounce it out. And that's just as you would expect to do. Yeah. Then for me, my last step, you could just send it to mastering like that. That's okay. So I'm checking I'm checking the level on the main master out all the time. I don't want it going over at all, of course not. And on my main master out here in my control room, I'm running SonarWorks as well. So I ran these monitors without SonarWorks for a while I've got some Mackie HR264 monitors, and I ran it without Sonarworks. And I've got a very good friend of mine who's a composer, Leonard Bush, and he said you need to look into Sonarworks. And I did the mic. I did it. I've only got a small room here. Used to have a proper big studio, big console, everything. So now I'm at a very limited space to be able to do this in. So maybe a lot of you guys are going to be in the same situation. But I think the best benefit you can do is spend the money and get Sonarworks. It's not expensive. Set your monitors up. I mean, look, I'm cluttered here behind bits of kit and everything. I'm sat in a chair here as well. But I get the best sound out of these monitors now that I know that I can, which is great. But of course, you must bypass it when you render it, because you can't have it going to mastering with Sonarworks colouring your main master. But of course, you'll know that when you get Sonarworks, because there's like the big red alert. Don't render it with Sonarworks there. This Sonarworks has the phones set up for my DJ headphones, which have stayed with me ever since an HD25. And they've even got, Sonarworks even have a setting for the velour head pads as well, which is crazy. But you won't believe the difference. I mean, I'm not trying to sell them at all, but I'm just trying to make you realise that if I sit here and I listen to the mix on my monitors here, and then I swap it over and I put my headphones on with the velour head pads on it, I'm telling you now, it sounds the same. And that's great. So when my kids are here at home, I don't have to bore everybody. I can have them turn quite quiet as well, and it will sound the same as the main mix. So when they're gone, I can turn it up, take the headphones off, switch it over and go, it sounds exactly the same. And how brilliant is that? Perfect. And I never had access to that back in the day as well. And I had a really bad pair of Wharfedale Diamond 4 studio. They're not even studio monitors, they were hi-fi speakers. But I got used to them. So getting used to your monitors, I still had to, I still have got to tune myself in a way to Sonarworks, and I keep flicking back to popular pieces of music. I say pop music to check that I'm in there amongst it, because that's very important. So that's all we've got time for now. But make sure you come back for part 2, and I'll continue showing you some of the other bits and pieces that I get up to and how I go about putting tracks together.